Yep, we're recording.
We're recording, and I will call. Oh, fuck. I hate this moment.
We're waiting for the phone call to connect.
Yeah, damn. God damn it. Oh.
Hello?
Hi, is this Joe? This is Brian and Theo.
Hi.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good. Is it okay if we're recording right now?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Great. How's it going, man?
Pretty good. I just got a coffee, and I'm looking forward to talking to you both. It's pretty cool that, you do a podcast on the kind of Boston arts. I think this sounds fun.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely been a ride. We've interviewed some really interesting and bizarre, and it just definitely a lot of interesting people come in. And we took a little bit of a recent break from interviews, and this is actually our first one back.
Yeah.
Is talking to you, so it's good to be back into the flow of doing this again.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So one thing we should probably say right off the bat is that we've never met you.
Yeah.
Or talked to you before. So good to meet you on the phone.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you in the virtual realm.
In the virtual realm. Hell yeah. Maybe could you tell us and maybe for the listener a little about yourself and what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. I call myself a magical artist, and my name is Joe Ledoux. It's Ledous, like X-ray for the last name.
Okay.
And and I call myself a magical artist because I think when I tell people that I'm a magician, there's a lot of things that people associate with magic that are not art. Like, I think generally people think of entertainment with rabbits and cards.
Yeah.
And I had gone to mass art and loved magic, but by heart I was more of an artist than an entertainer. So I was really unhappy doing magic, and I had done kids' birthday parties and had done a lot of traditional magic as a kid. And one day later in my life, I was supposed to be doing like a burlesque show where they wanted variety acts. And I remember there was a snowstorm, and my show got canceled, and I remember jumping up and down and saying, yes, I don't have to go. And I was thinking, wait, something's wrong. Why don't I want to show up to my own magic show? And I realized that I was approaching it the wrong way, and that I would kind of have to reinvent myself if I really wanted to enjoy what I was doing. And then a light bulb went off in my head is why not just approach magic instead of an entertainment, but as an art form. So I started only performing in art galleries and having my paintings up, because I think the way that a brush moves and makes something appear is like a wand conjuring an image. So part of my magic shows, my paintings are up and people have wine and look around the gallery, and then they'll sit down and I'll tell personal stories and do sleight of hand to sort of make the stories come to life and animate and be this artistic performance art. And sometimes there's even, long story short, I'll even project animations that I made at mass art between some of the effects, and it's sort of like this art is magic experience.
That's really cool. It sounds like a really immersive thing to see as a viewer. Could you tell us a little bit about, because I know you mentioned that you did more traditional magic when you were younger and that your magic shows are a little bit different now. What would it be like if somebody were seeing one of your acts for the first time? How would that, what do you do in one of your shows?
So like currently?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the last show, the last couple shows I did, one was in a skateboard shop, and the other one was in Maximum Hesh. It's closed, but it was in Somerville.
Cool.
And then I rented, well, actually, I didn't even rent it. I was friends with people at this puppet theater, and I really liked the stage because it was so small. And I really like the intimacy of a gallery or a small parlor room. Mm-hmm. And I think I had emo music blasting, or a lot of punk music was playing just on speakers when people came in. So most of the people that are coming into these shows know who I am. It's not like people are showing up to see a magician. I mean, I send a press release out, but they're usually very clear that it's an art is magic kind of approach. So I think through the way that people find out about it, they're not really expecting a traditional magic show, and most people are seeing me by my name. they usually know about me and are showing up. So it gives me like complete freedom. But like generally the last show we had the paintings up in the puppet theater, like all on the walls. Some of them were even like leaning against the wall. And there was like, I don't know if it was Weezer, but I really like punk, and I grew up skateboarding to like a lot of emo music, but not like My Chemical Romance, more like the skateboard side of emo,
like Scrams type shit.
Yeah, or like I don't know if you know Piebald or
I'm not super into that genre, but a close friend of mine only listens to that type of music. So I'm
yeah, and I mean, I love everything, but I kind of grew up during that time, and I don't do this at all of my magic shows, but the last time I was performing, I remember feeling a little out of sorts and nervous, so I figured that I would just put on like a sweater, and instead of walking out on stage all comfortable, I would just, come out hunched over and kind of tap into that kind of awkward emotion, and instead of thinking that there's some kind of specific formula that I have to follow, I could just come on nervous, actually. And at part of the show, I put jazz music on, and I hand out my hat, and I tell everyone, just take like a bobby pin or something from your purse and just put it into the hat, as long as you don't care if I break it, or if you're willing to throw it away. And then when the jazz music was on, I just improv magic with everyone's object. So, there was huge room for failure, because I didn't know what people were going to put in. And I really like feeling uncomfortable sometimes when I'm performing it. And I think when things get so scripted and so formulaic, it's really boring to perform. So I try to perform differently every time.
That's interesting. I'm actually curious too, to kind of bring it backwards a little bit, is you said that you in the beginning were doing, like more conventional magic acts at like birthday parties and stuff. Could you tell us how you even got there in the first place? Because I guess I'm just interested in the idea of like somebody who's just like an artist, like listening to like punk and emo and skateboarding. How did that kid turn into somebody performing magic at birthday parties?
Yeah, I think
what was that journey like in the beginning?
I think naturally skateboarders are outsiders, so I didn't have friends. I remember the pressure of like going to the lunchroom and just shaking, looking for a spot to sit, and someone was like, hey, you can sit in the art room. And that's when I really connected to art and found out that it was a way to cope with life. So I gravitated towards magic, skateboarding, and art, because they were all different art forms that you could find a sense of belonging when you don't feel like you fit in anywhere. And then all of those art forms require you at some point in your life to have an art show, go into a skate park or do a demo, or to stand on a stage and perform magic. So if you stick with something long enough, which you're naturally, drawn to because you're bad at everything else, I guess, or you're not good at sports, at some point, you're going to progress, and then there's a question of like, am I going to show up?
Right, or like try to get jobs doing this thing that I'm good at, or something.
Yeah.
Or learning.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of anxiety, and I remember I would just walk to school and my teachers would be like, I wave at you every day and you're staring at your feet. I think introverts, naturally, people hide where they're strong, and introverts tend to be really good speakers. So, if someone's like cracking jokes all the time, they're usually not very funny. I think we really hide our strengths, and different teachers helped me break out of that. Like my art teacher, even though I didn't want to go, sent my art in and got me into this thing called Art Allstate in Worcester. And I just remember showing up, and we had to meet in a group and do a collaborative piece and just talk in front of a group. And I think that the stepping stones are just the different teachers and people that push you. Like my grandmother, whenever there would be a wedding, would be like, my grandson's a magician, come over to this table, perform for this table. And I was this shy, awkward kid, and I brought the stuff because I knew she was going to ask me, but I never wanted to do it. And it was like there was always this moment after I did it, like something was missing. I would do a card trick, and when you're a kid, it's hard for people to take you serious. It's like, it's so much easier. I'm 38 now, so as you get older, it's so much easier to be an artist. But when you're a kid, it's like, I don't know, I know that there's like 10-year-olds performing at pumpkin patches right now, and it's like, it's got to be awkward as hell for, like, because you love magic and you get hired to do this like gig, but you're just a kid.
Right, so there's like kind of a cute, like, you might not be a good, you're like, there's probably, in your head, you're like, or looking back, you're like, was I good at this thing I loved, or was I a cute kid with like a cape? And the parents just put me up on the stage as this like adorable little kid magician or something. Is it kind of like an element of that?
It totally is. I mean, yeah. Because you can't be good. You're just starting. I mean, if you just start playing guitar and then it's a family gathering and someone's like, and it's a campfire and someone's like, hey, play one of your songs. I mean, you're just learning.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be that call of whether you're going to level up to the next stage.
Yeah.
In whatever art form. And outsiders are artists. And every platform, whether it's a musician, skateboarder, painter, there's always another stage or another way of, now there's Zoom. I find Zoom calls to be awkward, but that's the new place to show up and perform. And it's like, are you going to show up? I mean, even these podcasts. I have not done a Zoom show yet.
Right. But yeah, no, it is definitely true that there is like a calling or a leveling up that tends to happen, I guess, with pretty much everything like that, when it goes from hobby to passion to discipline,
And I guess I just never said no. Like, I got an opportunity to perform on, they had the Guinness World Record for the longest running magic show in the world in Beverly, and I went to see the show, and after the magic show, the magician signaled with his finger for me to come over, and he's like, are you a magician? And I was like, yes. And he's like, how would you like to perform here? Huh. And I was terrified, but I said yes. And I juggled in the show and would go in and train with them. But that was the first time I was on an actual stage, in a theater.
How did he know you were a magician?
I have no idea. It's
you think you just had the look?
I remember I waved to him. I waved to him on my way out. And, I think that in magic, there's just so many synchronicities. And it also has to do with, chance favors a prepared mind. I think Louis Pasteur said that. And if you think about it, the more prepared you are, the more willing you are to say yes. Because these things happen in our lives every time. Opportunities are always presented to us. And I think a lot of times we just say no and forget about it. But it's just a matter of being open to the situation. There was a thing they did where they put dollar bills on the ground and they had people walk from point A to B, and the people that said they were lucky saw the bills on the ground way more than the people that thought they were unlucky. So I think, being open to synchronicity and, being prepared to say yes, you're going to get, because if you're a musician and you're just playing music, someone's going to be like, hey, will you open for our band or something, and it's just I've just always said yes every time.
How do you think you end up in that kind of and I guess, was there a time where you said no, and how did you kind of how did you get into, I guess, that mindset of just being ready to just do some shit? Because I guess you were saying as a kid you were really introverted and you didn't know where to sit at lunch, you know what I mean? So that seems like a pretty big leap to just agreeing to do an impromptu magic show or to perform.
I think I've always been willing to just take the hit. I remember someone saying hey, this girl has a crush on you in high school, you should go ask her out. And I just remember being terrified and just going and doing it. And I feel half the time it goes the wrong way and half the time it goes the right way. But I just remember suffering a lot and just really, really trying to push myself, and letting the action tell me what will happen. And I really like to get things outside of my head and outside of thought.
It's interesting too, because to double back to something you said in the very beginning of when we were talking, it seems like you really lean into vulnerability, like in life and in your magic too, and in your art. I think that's a really interesting way to go about it, and there's kind of a power to that. Do you think that that's a true statement?
Yeah, and I think that is what connects us to people, because the more that you're vulnerable, the more you feel like less alone. You know, I think that like our problems are the secrets. In theater, they say if you have a problem, use it. So if somebody was like, hey, I just feel like a boring, ordinary person and I have nothing to say, it's like, well, say that and see how many people you connect with. It's like, that is how you will relate to people. And I think that art makes us feel less alone. If you see a painting about someone that has experienced a loss of relationship, you know, or just, it doesn't always have to be something happy. I think that's how we connect. And if you just shield your emotions and put on a front, I think that you're not really connecting. You're sort of, you're filtering out your heart and not really being able to relate to people.
I think one thing a lot of people experience too, like definitely some people listening to this, is like that is extremely hard, especially for newer or younger artists, is that fear of failure, or that fear not just of making something bad, but failing publicly and embarrassing yourself in front of groups and stuff. And I think that, you know, you probably know this, but I would say you have a lot to offer in terms of speaking about that failure and that vulnerability, because like, I don't know, as a performer, you could stand up on a table in like a room and like just start speaking, right? Like if you had to, you just could. But there are a lot of people that even if they wanted to do that, they would probably rather melt and die like on the floor than do that. You know?
Yeah, is it like people fear public speaking more than death?
Yeah,
more than death.
Yeah. So I guess like, how did you like? Because you know, there's this idea of like just as a kid, just being like, fuck it, like I'll ask this girl out, or like fuck it, like I'll do the magic show, or something. But like, I guess like, were you thinking critically about that then, or do you think it was like just how you were as a kid? Like maybe did you have a parent or someone that was encouraging you to be that confident at that age?
I've never felt confident. I mean, it's kind of like, and I mean, my parents, they did let me go to art school and stuff, but I'm trying to think of like, I think that really it came out of suffering. I think the fact that, let's just say I was really good at sports and got all A's and, you know, was like the quarterback. I think that skateboarding teaches you resilience, because you go out, you fall, you get back up. It's like, I remember the first time I dropped in, everyone's staring at you at the ramp, and you know when you drop in, you're going to fall and they're going to laugh at you. It's like all of the things that I was doing because I was not good at other things were vulnerable, and they were teaching me resilience from the very beginning. And I just, I think, skateboarding really, really taught me a lot on how to be brave and just not care what people think. And I think that being bad at school too, like I never tested well. I really had to work hard to get what I wanted, and it taught me how to learn. And I think like a lot of times in school, if you're good at something, you never push yourself and realize that you can get what you want. And it's like, I was learning that I could get what I want if I worked hard. And I was learning to not give a shit what anyone thinks from skateboarding. And I was also learning that there's other communities that are not in the horrible world that you can be in high school. Like that, because I would skateboard and I would sit alone at lunch, people would bring me to the coolest parties after, you know. It's like,
oh yeah.
There's so many layers of reality, and it's like, you can sometimes feel so stuck and just not be aware of all the other options.
Yeah, it's definitely true. I relate a lot to the idea of skateboarding, like building confidence as a kid too, because like I grew up skating and I still skate, and like, you know, as a little kid, like, I just like, like, I would, you can just fall and bounce off of the pavement, and, like, you get kind of hurt, but, like, you're ultimately it's fine. And I think, like, there's a lot to be said of, like, physical stuff and with health and athletics or whatever, but I think mentally, like, in a way, I definitely didn't know this at the time, but I think it just made me less afraid of injury, or, like, just, like, scraping my body on the cement, like, kind of, like, probably in a way kind of gave me, like, a similar thing that you're talking about, where I just didn't really mind, you know what I mean? If I, like, I don't know, because, like, in a way, embarrassment is, like, a similar thing as, like, it's like a mental equivalent of falling and scraping, like, your arm and shoulder and your knee, and, like, like, when you say something dumb in front of a group of people, like, you have emotionally fallen and, like sprained your wrist. So I think, like, at the time, like, growing up, I think, like, I was probably building that character and not even really understanding that I was, because I was, like, pretty antisocial in terms of, like, conventional, schooling. Like, I don't know, anyway, whatever.
I think you nailed it. I think you're spot on. I mean, it really does toughen you up emotionally and physically, and I remember going to the chalkboard and I would get problems wrong. I mean, that toughens you too. I mean, every experience of failure, like my magic teacher where I study at the McBride Magic and Mystery School, he says, fail forward fast. And the best jugglers have simply dropped more than anyone else. I had, a dinner with a Harvard business grad. And he's like, you know what they told us when we went out and graduated? He's like, they told us we're sending us out to fail, because the best businesses will just fail over and over. And, after, like, trial 300, that's when you become the billionaire. And it's like, I really like the idea of failing forward fast, because if you do anything, it's the failure is the teacher. It's like, okay, I was doing this drawing and, I noticed the arm is wrong, but because you saw the failure, that's where you know how to get it right. It's like, we don't realize, like, failure is really just a step in the right direction, or an understanding of where you need to go. So it's I don't look at it really as a bad thing. I try to embrace it. And that's especially how I've been taught even more recently, with some of the masters that I study with, is that to do it fast. And I remember when Zoom first hit, they went out and started doing shows. And I remember the first one, the audio wasn't working, and they were like, and I would imagine you guys in this show have probably worked out kinks like this, and they were swearing over the air. And you look at it now and it's like, it looks like some kind of polished TV, and it's just because they just kept failing, and they did it for like 10 years, and now they have this amazing Zoom magic show thing going on.
Yeah. Wait, so this is a little bit beside the point, but I feel like I have to ask. I'd be remiss to not ask. What is the School of Magic and Mystery? Can you talk about that? Because that's really interesting.
Yeah, so it's a school in Las Vegas, and I lived in California for a little while and went to the Magic Castle, and that's where I met my teacher, Jeff McBride, who was performing. And I had written to him because I felt lost out in California, and I was trying to be a screenwriter at the time.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I always loved magic as a kid. So he's like, be my guest at the Magic Castle tonight. And I met him there, and he became my magic teacher. And he has a school called the McBride Magic and Mystery School. And one of the things I really like about the school is that it's not just about the tricks. They really teach the history and kind of the shamanic roots of where magic came from. And it's very mystical, and there's stuff there for everyone though, because they even have alchemists and Christian priests and and Buddhists. It's like, it's not, and everyone teaches something at the table. Like, there was a priest that came in and taught us how to make and I don't consider myself to be Christian or anything, but he taught us how to make a guardian angel coin appear. And I was like, well, like, maybe if I meet someone religious, I could do this for them. And it's like, that's why I love the school, is so many people teach different wisdom ideas. And we study marketing, we study the history of magic. David Copperfield came in and taught one of our last classes. It's just the best people and the most wise people that you'll ever meet on earth, all gathering around a campfire, basically, and just teaching magic tricks for serious artists.
That is so interesting. I had no idea that there was such a rich culture to that.
Have you ever seen the Netflix sitcom Love by any chance?
No.
Because
it's really good.
There's literally a character in the show who's this like dude in his like mid-30s living in California trying to be a screenwriter, and he goes to the magic castle and he's super interested in magic and is like this just regular dude. Like, I don't know. It was just kind of weird because you just described like just the main character of that show.
Oh wait, that was me.
Yeah, right. Anyway, but yeah, that's like fucking crazy, because that's a really interesting thread to us as well, because something that we love to ask, like a lot of our guests and that you just got into, is like, we ask people about, mentorship and stuff. And, me and Theo often find that when we meet people who are like really, really great at something or passionate about shit or whatever, they often studied underneath somebody a lot older than them or a lot more experienced or knowledgeable, and it like kind of was this almost Yoda, Luke Skywalker journey, in that artist's life, you know what I mean? So, and you just kind of like touched on that a little bit, but do you think that, like, did you have a mentor during that time, and how did that relationship build, and like how did you end up there?
They changed. So like in high school, it was my art teacher, Cheryl Adams, who just, I remember Rodney Mullen saying, your heroes are the people you look up to. It's usually like the fifth grade teacher that had hope in you. It's I owe so much of my life to her. It's like, she took art serious. She got me into mass art, like photographed all my art, got me slides, helped me apply. I wasn't in, I don't even think I could afford a camera at the time. Like, I wasn't in like a really wealthy family. And that's why I think I like skateboarding so much. You're just on a board for, if you can get one, and you could be on any street in your area and be having fun. But she's like the first person that I can think of who just had that faith and sort of started guiding me. And then in college, there was different animation teachers, Flip Johnson, Steve Gentile, a couple people who I really connected with. I remember I'd done this animated show, like script, and read it in my screenwriting class, and this horrible teacher that I had was just like, how many people knew exactly where this was going right when it started? And like half the class raised their hand. And I remember like wanting to cry, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is good to point out, because you also have bad teachers. And, here's a guy getting, paid to teach, and, no judgment. Like, who knows what he's going on in his own life. Like, I believe in different times of our lives, we can all be an asshole. I've definitely lived that character at some point in my life. But, at the time, he's like, if you want me to like look at this and make this better with you, I smoke on my lunch break between 1, and 2, sometimes in the courtyard, sometimes out like over to the public safety bikes, and sometimes like out in front of he gave me like 3 different locations to like try and find him what he was smoking. And I'm just like, and I remember him being like, hey, you need to put David Blaine in this, so there's a celebrity. And then I went and showed it to Flip Johnson, and my animation teacher was like basically heartbroken, and he's like, Joe, you loved this idea before you showed it to him. And he's like, you just need to make the film that your heart's in, and steered me into making the film. And it's my favorite film I've ever made. And I still show it, like even at my magic shows now, because I did love the idea and I believed in it. And it's so easy to be fragile and just have a bad teacher or even a friend like ruin your growth. Yeah. And, so those animation teachers, and then when I moved out to LA, I met my magic teacher. I also am Ralph Bakshi, who's a pretty famous animator, has passed down painting things to me that Norman Rockwell showed him. Wow. I kind of go to him a lot to learn things about painting and art. And, I also was doing a couch gag for The Simpsons that never got used, but I got to study with Mark Kirkland. And he's a director of The Simpsons, and he coached me, and I drew it all up, and then we pitched it, and they said they couldn't use it because I'm not a famous enough magician, but he was being a mentor and teaching me about the animation process. And even Rick Heath, he was at that theater that I mentioned that I started doing, that had the Guinness World Record. He passed down an illusion from that show to me, and I talk to him on the phone like every month, and he's always coaching and telling me different things about magic and mailing me magic books in the mail. So I probably have like 50 mentors.
Wow, that's amazing.
That is incredible. And I think one thing that would be interesting to hear you talk about as well is, I imagine there could be people listening to the show with you, and maybe they're early on their journey, or I don't know, or maybe they don't have that kind of confidence, or they're kind of in a beginning stage where they feel like they could benefit from a mentor, but and anybody could, but they have no idea how they could even get that, you know what I mean, or how they could approach somebody and try to get that value, from people or people in their industry. Do you have any advice for somebody in the most basic way on getting a mentor in your life, or getting that help, or that, or having a relationship with somebody like that?
Yeah, I do. I've got a lot to say on it. All right. First off, they don't have to be alive. So if you feel like really, really lost, you can just, you want to make sure that it doesn't feel forced, and that if you're reading a book or, going to, because a lot of really wise people, even painters, skateboarders, there's books out there. And usually it just it takes Googling a couple keywords. Like, say if you love, for some reason, music and painting, there's probably, if you look up, just Google, the connection between music and painting, you can probably already find a guide, that someone that's written a book. And then on the next level, I think it's looking at the people that you're reading. You read a book and you're like, I love this person. Or if you're a musician, I love this songwriter. Whoever your hero is, and that's where it gets hard, you just go on Instagram and you message them hey, I saw that you're this song, and I loved it, and I was wondering, do you do Zoom lessons? Can I start studying how to play guitar? You're my favorite musician in the world. And I think the danger is that a lot of times they say no. And when I first met Rodney Mullen, I was like, hey, do you want to hang out? And he's like, so many people want to meet. And he just he was the nicest guy, but I got it, so many people want to meet him. And but even though he didn't hang out with me and he said no to being a mentor, I never asked him to be my mentor, but I was trying to connect and get closer to him. I still listen to all of his talks. And when I first went to meet Ralph Bakshi, he didn't want anything to do with me. And then he's like, what do you want? And I was like, I want to study with you. And he's like, you can't, I'm old. And I think I left crying, but then I went to another event and I saw him, and I was like, hey, I still love what you do, and I was wondering if I could show you some of my art. And he's like, go talk to my son, he'll give you my phone number. And then I called him, and he was like, how'd you get my number? It was sometimes he was mean to me, and then sometimes he was nice. And now I've kind of built more of a friendship. But I think you have to be willing to say, this person may be too busy, they may not be who I think they are, but I'm going to ask them. And if they say no, I'm not going to let that get into the way of listening and still liking them. It's I think it's really important to be able to know that people don't like you and still like them. I think you have to have that mentality, and you just have to reach out to all the different people. It helps if someone's in your area, things that are local can be really good. I mean, I've even written to professors, and I've gotten into schools to sit in on classes for free and learn. I think it really just starts with this amazing thing on the internet that you can just reach out to your heroes, and even you can even just ask for advice, like in an email, like, hey, this is what I'm doing and where I am. Do you have any advice? And sometimes they'll just email you back something. And that can be very meaningful to get advice from someone that you love, even if it's only once, and pushing your comfort zone, showing up to things and not just sitting on the couch. I think you have to, push your comfort zone. And I think that's where you find meaning, is by experiences and things that you wouldn't normally do. I don't know if that's helpful.
Absolutely. That was a wonderful answer. Were you going to say something, Theo?
Not about that point, but I was going to ask a question a few minutes ago.
Okay.
But I was just wondering, too, to double back a little bit, talking about mentorship and sort of the lineage of different ideas and philosophies in art and within different artistic practices. When you were saying a lot of what you learned in the magic school that you attended was, like, there was a lot of depth to that, and that there was a lot of history to it in the sense of kind of being adjacent to spirituality, and that there was a sort of, you said, shamanic history to it. Could you speak to that a little bit for people who might not know? Because like me, yeah.
That's like the most magical thing. I used to think like magic was all about how, and when I started to go to the roots of it, you start to realize it's about why and the symbolism. The early shamans would do magic tricks where they would take like a piece of twine and they would cut it up and say, like, in life we encounter loss of relationship, and they would cut a piece of the twine or tear it with their hands, and then they would say we experience death and different things, and they would talk about how through love and healing it could become whole, and they would pull the thread and it would be all together. And now the modern magician just cuts it and restores it, and there's no story or symbolism. So when I started to study with Jeff McBride, he would do these amazing things where he would take a string and put it around my finger and say, think of a problem that's holding you back in your life. And I would be like, okay. And then he would say, can you feel that thing that's holding you back? And as he did that, he would pull the string against my finger. So metaphorically, I would associate the problem with the string. And then he would say, are you willing to see that problem as an illusion? And when I said yes, he would pull it through my finger, which it was an illusion. It didn't really go through my finger. And then he would say, well, now you're free. And he would tie it around my hand and say, this is a gift to remind you that you're free.
Wow.
So this is really, the shamanic magic goes back to being symbolic and metaphorical. And that's what makes magic real, right? Like, if I catch a coin out of the air, that's one thing, and it's a puzzle, and it's sort of like, where did that come from? But if I catch a coin out of the air and then shine a little light off the sun or a light bulb in the room, and I say, where there's light, there's magic, and I'm just here to shine a little magical light into your life, and I shine the light and like flicker the coin, and you see that light, that's the shamanic kind of approach of using it as healing and using it to brighten people's day, and using magic as a path, a spiritual path, and thinking into your heart of what do I want my magic to be, and what story do I want to tell, and what metaphor do I want to use.
That is so interesting. I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah, do you feel like there are a lot of people in your industry and that are doing magic that are trying to give it that kind of message and have that kind of meaning, or do you feel like it's like more dominated by people with like a, I don't know, like you were saying, like this kind of cliche of like pulling the rabbit out of the hat just for fun, just ha and everyone claps? Or do you feel like is there kind of maybe a growing movement of people who want to give magic more of like a more substance as it relates to their life and their in the mind?
I mean, that's what I see happening. I see what happened in history is that science, art, and magic used to be connected, and they all separated, and people specialized. So you get like entertainers, artists, scientists. And now I see, it's an alchemical formula, solve et coagula. But basically, historically, people used to be a lot of different things, and they knew how to harmonize these things together. And I see all of the art forms starting to rejoin. Rodney Mullen is a skateboard scientist. He's blending art and science together, and I see a lot of everything becoming more artistic and more scientific.
Yeah, and there's also a big pressure. I think I'd like to hear your thoughts on this too. Like, I've felt like social media has caused a lot of people in probably any industry you could think of to start to try to think of how they can fit their field or discipline into a piece of media. You know what I mean? Or become and promote it in some way, or get it out there in front of people, versus, I don't know, like if you were, I think, like, for example, like if you were gonna, like, it wouldn't, the average person wouldn't watch like a 5-hour lecture on like really complicated like mathematics, but they might. I don't know if you've heard of the YouTuber from back in the day, Vihart, for example. She was like a YouTuber where she would make these really fun and interesting and artistic videos explaining really complicated math concepts that were boiled down into like a 7-minute video, but she was actually talking about these extremely complicated, like, college level mathematics.
Sounds awesome.
And I think that there's a lot of people that feel called to do that these days, where maybe throughout most of the 20th century, it was more chill to just be a professional and to not feel any need to promote that or speak about it or be in front of people about it, and like, do you feel like maybe, because you probably spent a lot of your young adult life without social media, right?
Yeah.
So
oh my God, there was never a
changed?
camera there. I mean, sometimes when we would skateboard, but
Right.
It was so much of just for the sake of it.
Do you feel like, do you feel like that affected your craft, that change in the zeitgeist?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like it's a tricky question because we're like in the middle of it, right? And it's like sometimes when you're in the middle of something, it's harder to see how it's going to develop. I mean, I just don't think you can really go wrong. Like, if there was a magician that was like, okay, I just feel this obligation, like I have to be doing magic every day, and for like 5 years they just did only magic videos, I think when they get older and meet a serious magician, they would have gotten a lot better just from doing those shows. Like, even if they weren't even that good, like, and even if they're not really learning, the symbolism, they probably would be getting pretty good at the mechanics. And then I think we just enter different stages of our lives, right? So it's like, if you're really young right now and you feel this demand to like perform, having not developed yourself, you're going to develop from doing it. And then later in your life, you're going to probably find a deeper way to develop. It's like, there's all kinds of horrible videos of celebrities that sing or did like bad acting videos, but they did them. They showed up. So I think the danger of it is sort of like when you go on a trip and you're taking pictures the whole time, that you don't experience the trip. If you're not experiencing life, you have to, like, I've heard the internet doesn't come with a user's guide. So it's like, if you know how to discipline your time and get texture out of life and more balance, I think it can be really good. I think it's just about learning how to do a TikTok video and then be like, okay, now I want to go sit out at nature and just like look at the birds and the butterflies, and maybe even with someone I love, and look at them in the eyes and not look at my phone, and have coffee without our phones for, an hour. I think it's really not like this is bad or this is good. And I don't think if you're doing anything that you're wasting your time because you're learning. And I think that it's just the danger of getting lost in doing only that and realizing that there's other ways of learning. Like, you need to learn digitally, but you need to learn about your heart, and you need to learn how to connect with people, and you need to learn maybe exercise physically, right? Like, if you're in space too long, you need to exercise, because otherwise when you come down to Earth, your muscles are
their bone density is all fucked up and shit.
Yeah, so it's like you just have to make sure you're not getting lost into one area without working other sides of yourself. That's the way I see it.
Makes sense. Too much of anything is not a good thing.
Right, and especially with the internet, because, like, there's just, like, there's so much, like, I don't know, like, I found, like, I don't know, some of the best times I've had in my life probably were me traveling, and, you know, I love to travel and stuff, and, like, every time I have traveled, I always forget before I leave, but once I'm out there somewhere, you find yourself driving through maybe somewhere with a lot of mountains, or maybe farmland, or whatever it is, but there's literally no service whatsoever, and your phone just becomes a brick because you're, like, in the middle of a fucking forest, like, somewhere, like, driving endlessly. And, like, I feel like through some of those times, like, initially it's super frustrating because you're like, fuck, like, my GPS won't work, like, blah, 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 like, how do I find the restaurant, or, like, whatever. But you're also just, like, it puts you deep, like, it makes you, like, remember that you have, like, a corporeal form, and you are in a space, like, in the geography, you know. And I think that might contribute a lot to why a lot of people have, like, really spiritual feelings about travel, probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who could say?
It reminds me of, like, you brought me back to when I would go camping as, like, a kid, and just, like, the power of the rangers giving me, like, a Smokey the Bear comic and sitting in the tent with a flashlight. I mean, yeah, it's on your phone too, but yeah, there really is something, like, you're more spontaneous, right? Like, because your phone goes down and you're talking about driving around and stuff, but it kind of grounds you to the present moment, because you have to react more to all the spontaneity, right? And it sort of puts you in the present moment. I mean, I definitely can relate to what you're saying, and I think it's very poetic, and, you know, I think a lot of people, I wish I traveled more, personally. Now you make me want to travel.
Yeah, well, you know, it's definitely a nice thing, but yeah, I think that there is, like, I don't know. I think actually that's kind of, I'm now realizing the question about, like, social media and stuff and being in front of people actually was kind of I forgot an important element, and that is the person. Like, I was asking you, who you are primarily like, in a sense, a performer. So, like, now that I'm thinking about that question, like, that probably would have been answered differently by somebody who their craft was more, could be solitary, but, like, there really isn't that much room for a magician to just be a private, like, oh, sorry, there's a train blowing its horn right next to us. But I guess it's kind of interesting because, like, the idea of, like, a solo practitioner that never shows anybody what they do, like, do you think that's even that common for somebody who's a magician? Or, because it seems to me, talking to you, like, maybe it could relate a little bit to even stand-up comedy, where those people probably can't learn or develop at all unless they perform.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the audience gives you the best jokes, right? Like, I know when I was a street performer, I would go out on Newbury Street, and people would give you the lines. Like, you would say something, and then they would say something because they're really funny, and then you're like, I'm going to use that, like, the next time. So, like, I mean, I would guess that, like, if you do comedy a lot, the audience probably gave you a lot of your best jokes. I mean, it's like this give, take, learn kind of synergy. And, you know, there's a danger to that too, because my magic teacher was just telling this great story about how he said if you come out on stage and you do a trick or you say something and one person claps, right, that awkward clap, he's like, if you say, like, thanks, Mom, he's like, that will definitely get a laugh, but he's like, you've lost all your integrity, you know? So it's like, you can get the hack lines. But like, I think it takes a lot of courage to start exploring things that might not get the biggest reaction, but that feel more genuine. Like, I remember doing this piece where I wanted to end a routine where there's a piece of origami and the wings of this paper crane just start flapping, and I just give it to the person as a gift, and that's how the routine ended. And currently I've changed it because I don't think it's a strong enough way to end a routine, but I ended it like that a few times. And I was talking to my magic teacher, and he's like, I just can't answer this question for you, because you sort of like have to try it out and see how it feels. And if it feels right, then you like kind of keep it in or keep going with it, right? And some things in my shows are things that magicians have suggested to me, or that the audience has suggested that I like, and some things people have suggested or told me, or I've learned from doing a live show, and you know, you don't use it. But I think like a stand-up comedian, there's a huge similarity, because they usually have like a script and they do the same thing over and over. You don't necessarily need to create new material, and you can kind of tour with that. And I would guess that a lot of them probably experience like monotony and get bored, and they probably think of ways like I'm talking about and how to freshen it up. And I think because they're so scripted, if they're really good, it probably gives them a lot of improv where they can take chances of opportunities or things that people say, and they always have like the safety net of falling back on their polished act. You know, but I think they're almost the same. I mean, a magician and a stand-up comedian. I think the only difference is that the magician really has mystery as an element of what he's doing.
Well, I think it's really interesting too, because I've been thinking about this throughout a couple different things that you've been saying, but I feel like there is a moment in any artistic practice where it goes from being a focus on the what of what you're doing, or the how, like going into an art museum for the first time and looking at these master paintings and thinking like, how the fuck did this person do this? Like, what did they do, and what can I do to do that? And then it kind of shifts once you get kind of a stable footing in the technical aspects of your practice, whether it's magic or skateboarding or art or music, whatever it is, where it becomes about why. And those kinds of questions are so subjective. Like, it's a different answer for everybody, and getting to the truth of what you actually are doing it for and what you get out of it will guide you towards the most successful practice that you can have. Because if you're imitating anybody else, it's not really authentic.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it becomes a means to authenticity.
Yeah, they tell us like imitate and innovate, right? So it's like you want to, you know, but I think you really were spot on with like the why are you doing it? And those were the questions that really changed my life, where when, you know, people will say, well, who are you? And what do you want your magic to be? You know, if you're a musician, what do you want your music to be? Like those deep questions. And I think that you don't always have the answer, but it's safe to be like, okay, well, this is what I feel now, because I've changed a lot. And you start doing something, and then you're like, okay, like this was one part of my life, but now this other window of meaning is opening up, and I can change and, you know, reinvent and steer towards that. One thing that kind of came to mind when you were talking about those different stages that people might find interesting is like in magic, we explore different archetypes, and there's the trickster, the sorcerer, the oracle, and the sage. And they teach you different levels of why. So the trickster is sort of just out there to fool you and change your reality and show you it's not the way that you think it is. You know, oh, there's nothing in my hand, there's a coin, you know, it's a trick. And there's all kinds of trickster archetypes. I mean, I think the oldest time the word trick was used referred to catching a fish, where it sees like a hook and it bites it, it's tricked. And then there's sort of the sorcerer and all of them have different elements. Like the trickster is the element of air, and the sorcerer is the element of fire, and it's more about learning through wisdom and actually doing your magic shows and showing your kind of magical ability. And then there's another shift into the oracle where it's no longer about you. It's like the palm reading for someone else. And all of the magic shifts to not being about you and to about them. Like crystal ball readings, tarot cards. It's all magic that's for the other person, and it's mental, and it's in the mind, and it's the element of water. And then the sage is the element of earth, and it's about creating a teacher better than yourself, so that the art form lives and grows and continues to move on.
Interesting. Would you consider yourself to, like, with your performances, to belong to one of those specific archetypes? Yeah,
and the way that we think about it is that you can play all parts of them in your life right now. So they correspond to age. So like the sages are usually like 70 to 100, and they're the Yodas that are teaching. But a 10-year-old can play the sage, where if you learn a simple trick with a rubber band and you know how to teach one of your friends, you're playing the sage. So they teach us that we can shapeshift and play all of these different parts of our life now, but we might connect and feel part of one deeper with our age and kind of how we're learning. And I feel like being 38, I still feel like a sorcerer, and I do a lot of magic with fire, actually. But I'm really right now starting to get interested in palm reading, tarot cards, and crystal balls, and I can see myself wanting to like not focus on me anymore and just do magic for other people. Like I'm getting excited. I'm like, man, I want to have like a little wallet show where I have a little marble that can fit my wallet, and I can do like a little crystal ball for someone like at dinner. Like I'm starting, and I even had one of those little like fortune teller paper things that they call cootie catchers that you like move in your hands, you know, and you tell someone to like pick a color and a number.
Oh, like the it's like a little diamond shape, or like I know what you're talking about. Cool.
Yeah, and it like fits right in my wallet, but it's like it's a piece of oracle magic, and like I'm starting to really get into like less egotistical magic and thinking like, it's so much more fun to just do magic that's for other people and not like for me. You know, but it's like at a magic show, I'll come out as a trickster and I'll just catch cards out of the air and like blow them away, and then I'll kind of sit down on the stage and be like, you know, I think magic is an art, and this is really who I am, and here's a piece of artistic magic, you know, and then maybe I'll even teach a trick during the show to everybody. And then maybe at the end of the show, I'll tell them, you know, and they say if you live long enough, you can go full circle. And I think it exists in art too, right? Like Picasso just wanted to become like a kid again, like, but he went through many stages. Like a trickster painter just wants to make something real that tricks you and looks like reality. You know, a sorcerer painter would tour and have art shows and learn from doing their art exhibits and showing their skill as a painter. And then an oracular painter would get abstract and go more into the inner world and surrealism and paint more metaphorical symbols and maybe even, you know, like do illustrations of the tarot deck or something that is meant to really get someone else to reflect on the art. And then they also are like really great art teachers that take on students and teach them how to paint. So, you know, I think it's an interesting way of thinking about why are you doing what you're doing and what does it mean for this part of your life as an artist. And I think looking at different archetypes is extremely powerful because you start to connect to this mythic world. And, you know, I started looking at the archetype of the artist and what does it mean to be an artist. And you know, Jung had some things written about the artist archetype, and you can start to, you know, look at these sources that are bigger than yourself to draw from. You know, I started thinking, okay, well, what did the first paintbrush look like? And I found ones that were made out of feathers and Egyptian ones that were made out of these grass reeds. And what was the first paint ever used? And I started looking at alchemy and how they were creating pigment. And now I'm kind of working on a magic trick with a brush that kind of comes to life and starts moving and painting on itself. And it all came from going to the source of these things and looking at the archetypes.
That is so interesting. I feel like I have 1,000 questions to before you just
one thing that I was thinking, is there a name for this type of I guess, philosophy of magic in terms of these, you know, like the trickster, the sorcerer. What was the third one you mentioned, by the way?
Oh, the oracle.
The oracle, correct. Okay. And so is there a name for like maybe, you know, there's like different like philosophies of writing or genres of art? Is what you're talking about is there a name for that type of theory or study?
I'm not sure if it's a name. So my magic teacher came up with Jeff McBride came up with the archetypes for magic. I mean, they already existed,
right? But
he was the first one that I know of that put them in this wheel and sort of, but I think that the tarot cards are one of the things that everyone knows the archetypes from, because, you know, there's the fool.
The fool and the magician.
Yeah, every character on there is an archetype. So I think Joseph Campbell, really with like the hero's journey, was into archetype and these sort of different mythological characters. And I think a lot of actors are into these kind of concepts. You know, I think that you'd have to look up archetype and where it came from. But the way that I'm really talking about it, I think comes from Joseph Campbell, and it comes from, you know, Jeff McBride looking at these archetypes and then being like, okay, you know, these are patterns that we see in magic, and this is an interesting way of framing it. And I was like, well, Jeff, like, should I be practicing like this one at this part of my life? And he's like, don't think it's so much as a formula as something that you can get inspired off of and sort of use it to think about something differently. So, you know, I would imagine it's sort of like, okay, just grabbing a random card from the tarot, and if you got like luck, being like, okay, how can I think about playing with the character of luck as a performer, you know? And myself already, I'm like, all right, what if I got some 4-leaf clovers and started catching them out of the air, or having people draw different ones, and they're all 3-leaf clovers, but the one person in the audience that gets the 4-leaf clover is going to come up, you know? It's like, and then looking at where the word luck comes from, looking at all of the characters that are ingrained in our DNA, just from, you know, all of the different lives that have happened and us being born, you know, what were these mythological characters that were luck? I mean, I can't even think of one, maybe a leprechaun, you know? And okay, well, maybe that's the character I'm going to be, and I'm going to look at leprechauns. It's just something that you can start to play with. And, you know, I think personally right now it feels too forced, but like when I look at the archetype of the magician, I'm like, oh, okay, this resonates with my heart. This is who I am. So you can probably find an archetype that you feel your heart connecting to, and then let that thread kind of spark inspiration.
It's almost like using them as tools to guide you towards the truest version, or maybe not truest, but healthiest version of yourself, and how you can connect your identity with your art in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's almost as if the idea of studying magic is like divination in itself.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. I've never thought so. Like, I feel like almost like I've cheated myself in a way, because I think, like, I mean, admittedly, I'm not sure that I've ever thought this critically about magic, but the only magic I've been exposed to in my life, maybe I saw a magic show or two as a kid, but I think usually when I think of magic, I don't know if I can't think of the names of any of them, but have you seen viral videos of people on like boardwalk towns, or like walking around Las Vegas doing like card tricks to drunk people, and it's got like a billion views on it, that type of stuff? But yeah, so I think this is like a fucking absolutely sick introduction into this type of thinking, I guess, in terms of magic, because your shows must be really incredible. Like,
I've had some like really amazing moments. Like when I performed in the skateboard shop, I just remember, I mean, sometimes you cold read, and, you know, I remember some really young guys coming around, and I'm like, oh man, like, you know, like I remember when I was a teenager, like, I'm not sure, they might want to see like a David Blaine kind of signed card to wallet, and I'm always a little bit like curious what kind of experience they'll get from it. And I'll get messages from these like kids, and they're like, I didn't know magic could be that beautiful or something. And it's like, you're like someone that you read as like a punk kid showing up, like make a comment like that, you know? It's like, I think, and it's not that I was judging them. It's a different level of thinking, and you know, you just sometimes wonder. I guess the danger is that I don't filter what I do for the audience, because sometimes people bring kids and I'm like, the F words in my show, and they're like, that's okay. And I'm like, all right, you can watch it. But I don't really filter what I do for who's there, because I'd rather have them love or hate what I do. And I know a lot of magicians that have 2 different scripts, and they'll change what they do on who's in the audience,
There's a bunch of children with parents in the audience, so the performer might switch to the kids version.
Exactly. Like, we've been trained that there's 2 types of audiences: those that are there to remember and those that are there to forget.
Wow. And
usually the determining factor is alcohol. So if it's a drinking audience, they're just there to forget their troubles. They just want entertainment. If there's no alcohol, it's usually theatrical. People want a meaningful experience. And you're right about the kids too. Like, maybe you've got an adult show and a family show, but a lot of people will have like the comedic entertaining script for the same piece of magic and a meaningful theatrical script. And when I would street perform, I would tone it down a little bit. Like, I had a piece with worry dolls, and it was this kind of piece about making our worries disappear. And when kids would come with families, and these people are from all over the world visiting Boston, I mean, some people don't know what worry dolls are, and they look like voodoo dolls or something. So I would sort of be like, think of something you're afraid of, maybe some vegetables, or, to the kids, because they weren't paying to come to see me. I was like kind of on their turf. But when it's like my own magic show, and like it's my name, and people are coming to my basement show or to the skateboard shop or to a theater that I'm advertising, like, come see my artsy magic show, it's like, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm not changing it, So
Yeah.
I've talked to so many people about that, what you just said about audiences. There are those there to remember, and there's there to forget, or something.
Yeah.
And that is the best description of that difference I've ever heard. I've heard so many people try to describe what you just said, and I think you nailed it with the way of thinking about it like that.
I'll credit Jeff McBride, because that's the thing of the mentor. Like, that's literally his lines, and it's like,
that's so cool.
Those are the wise mentors that know how to simplify the stuff, because they've done so many shows and thought about this stuff. And speaking of mentors, they shave time off your development. It's like, they give you the wisdom right away, and it's like, okay, well, now I know my audience, and I know how to market it, and I know my niche, and it's like, they keep you from wasting time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why every generation of, like, for example, like with skateboarding, like, you look at a video of a pro skateboarder from the 80s, and it does not look like pro skateboarding. Like, it almost can look silly, but that skill getting passed down over and over again has created people who are doing like absolutely like insane, complicated and complex tricks down like dangerous fucking things, versus like 40 years ago or something, it was like completely rudimentary. So that, like every generation of either anyone from performers to athletes, artists, intellectuals. Yeah, it's like, what is that? There's like a phrase. It's, we stand on the shoulders of giants.
That's it.
Right. Wow.
This is a little bit off topic, but I'm just curious, because I know that a lot of people that we've talked to a few people before that skate and have traveled in different places and have talked about the culture of skateboarding in Boston compared to other places. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that. And then also, is the culture, like the scene, is the magic scene different in Boston than it is like on the West Coast?
Okay, so you're asking me what I think the skate scene is like in Boston, and then how I see the difference of the magic on the two coasts, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, perfect, yeah.
Okay. Skateboarding, I don't really know, because I'm so reclusive, and this is not a lie. I only skate in my living room, and I did do that before the pandemic. I will go out to the streets to film my skateboard videos. My girlfriend will go out and film me, but I skate in my living room now. That wasn't always the case. When I first was out at Mass Art, I tried to make friends, and I remember people just thought I was weird. Like, I remember seeing the skateboarder do this amazing trick over, like, they power slid over, like, a manhole cover, and I just was like, that looks so beautiful, and was like, here's my number, like, call me if you guys want to skate. And they just, like, stared at me, like, I've just always been that person that's just sort of, like, put themselves out there, and I think people find it awkward and weird. But I recently became friends with Abe Dubin, like Orange Man. I don't know if you guys know him from Fancy
sure.
Lab. But he came to one of my magic shows, and like we're best friends now. And
That's so
like
nice.
I know like a little bit about that skate scene and a little about him, and kind of like, like he's the skater. He doesn't live in Boston anymore, but we talk on the phone every month or so, and we get coffee when he's around, and I've been trying to like. He's been trying to get me out to skate like a bunch of times. I do skate sometimes on bike paths because most of the skateboarding that I'm doing magic. So I'm like riding and making the skateboard levitate and jumping back on it.
Oh, wow.
So I don't want people to be watching or behind me. So I usually go out and practice on bike paths because it's the only place I've found where I can be alone in the city. Because all of the stuff I'm practicing is so weird that people stop. Like even sometimes bikers will stop and they want to know what I'm doing because they just see the skateboard start to float up in the air, and they're like, but it's like I'm really trying to be alone and like in seclusion when I'm skating now.
Yeah.
And like all of my skateboarding is only seen on stage.
Yeah.
That's where it's seen publicly, or in my skate videos. I have 2 skate videos on YouTube.
Yeah, well, I'll have to watch them. I wish I watched them before this episode. No.
Oh, and then the other question about the East Coast, West Coast thing, with magic, yeah, like definitely, right? Like, because Vegas magic is really, really entertainment based. Although I will say, all of these really artistic, deep thinkers are kind of like secretly there, and a lot of their performances that look very trivial are extremely deep and symbolic. So I think some of the most artistic magicians are there in disguise. And also the areas create different types of magicians. Like New York City is so small that the rooms and like the little tight spaces because the apartments are small there, you tend to get a lot of really good magicians with card magic. And then people that live on farms tend to do like really big, large illusion shows. So it has a lot to do with what environment the magician lives in, and then who's around them, right?
Yeah.
Like to sort of, that's kind of how I see it. But, I would think that like Boston, I see like a lot of, like Houdini did something here where he escaped out of like a keg of beer. I think that like a lot of the stuff I see around Boston is kind of like a drinking culture and an entertainment culture. But I live in Brighton, and one of the things that I learned from Alan Moore was to center yourself and just look at everything around you as magic. So I looked at Alston and found out that Washington Alston, like one of Titian's American painter, like one of the best painters in the world, is how Alston got its name. And I've learned to like look at everything around me as magic. So I call my art studio in Brighton Bright Space. And I think of light as magic. And all these little house sparrows come around to my studio where my bird feeder is. And I have like 8 books on house sparrows because that's what's around me. And now these birds that everyone thinks are boring and, ignore on the sidewalks, like to me it's like a little fairy showing up, and I like jump up and down when I see one, and I bring seeds when I walk around the city and feed them, and I'm reading about them. And it's like now when I'm sad or something, one of these little sparrows like comes over where I'm waiting for the train, and like I throw it a seed, and like a friend shows up. It's like and I found out Ted Williams lived in Brighton at one time. So I have a Ted Williams pin that my dad gave me on my studio, that it's on a hypercube, and it reminds me to try and hit my artistic ideas out of the park. And, it's like, I look at the geography around me as magic and center myself, because I was trained to do that. And I think that like, it's really up to the individual to look at the landscape they live in, not as like I'm a little rat because in this poor neighborhood, because that's kind of what you'll become. And you can use alchemy and your mindset to read about the history of your streets, or find out, the history of the building that you live in, or, if It reminds me of like the Japanese culture, like where bamboo was a problem, and they look at problems and sort of, well, could we eat this or something? And that's kind of how I've started to look at what kind of magic I want to create by where I'm living.
That's so interesting. That's a really good way to view the world. Just like, it's kind of like a mindfulness practice, like savoring the things around you rather than resenting them for being there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people, like, I think it's probably a very American thing too, to see your environment and want to force it to change around you rather than finding the beauty and finding the, kind of meaning in where you are and learning how to adapt to it and enjoy it versus try to, like, bend something.
Yeah.
To.
Well, that's sort of why I was asking this question in relation to the skateboarding thing, because what I've observed and heard from people that have been on both coasts is that the skate culture obviously the skate culture in California is, like, pretty notorious for being very, like, laid back, and there's a lot of skill there because the weather's better, you're there all year and can practice all year. There's a longer history with, like, pool skating and everything. And in Boston, like, Lynch Family Skate Park was the first park that we've actually had in the city, and that was only a couple years old. And it's just, like, a harsher, like, there's more street skating. There's, like, when you go to Lynch, the atmosphere there is kind of different than it is even in other places on the South and North Shore, maybe, where it's kind of like a party in the summertime, and, like, there's a lot of people there. It's kind of, like, I don't know, it's just a different kind of energy in response to the environment and the people that live here, and the fact that it's in a city, and the fact that it's in a city that doesn't have that kind of development and history. So I just think it's really interesting, like, to think about people's skate style or art style or, like, their style of magic changing based on their environment and things that are just kind of products of where they're at versus any kind of personal decision necessarily. It's just a response to adapt your craft to what's around you. So, I don't know.
Yeah. It's so interesting, and it's like I feel I've never been to that park, and I remember when, like, 10 years ago or something, they said they were going to build it, and, like, by the time it was, like, here, it's like, man, I skate in my living room now, but what you're saying is so fascinating. Like, I love nostalgia and the different feels that different spaces have, and just, like, like how our environments and the people shape us, and everything has, like, its own certain tone. And I go by the commuter rail sometimes and, like, spy on the skate park out the window, and I always see, like, scooters, and just, like, I'm, like, trying to see, like, what's going on. And I'm not, no judgment on the scooters, it's just, like, it's like I always see a lot of variety out there, like where the skate parks I grew up with were just bikes and skateboards, but I think I see, like, rollerblades, scooters, like, I don't know, I've seen, like, a lot of range there, which it's kind of cool, because I guess, like you said, it's the only one here, so it probably brings a lot of different people.
Yeah, rollerblading and scootering especially are rapidly growing in popularity over the last couple of years as well.
Yeah.
So it's, like, I mean, like, new versions of it for sure. But yeah, definitely, that's an interesting point that you raised too about it being the only, like, skate park of its kind in Boston. So that actually probably is why it is such a extreme environment socially, and why there's so like, can be pretty, like, intense, is, like, it's because it is almost a bit of, like, it's a bit of a center of the universe type thing, where it's the only thing, like, there isn't like in California or even in, like, Los Angeles, the greater Los Angeles area, I can't imagine how many skate parks there are there. It's probably shitloads. Versus here, like, it's just Lynch and, like, a few other, like, smaller places to skate, but so it draws an incredible amount of people.
And I think it's great that it's here. Like, I think it adds character and, like, gives the city, like, some beauty to it. So, like, I'm a street skater. I never really skated park that much. I mean, we would go, but I grew up really skating, like, the streets of Worcester, and when I came to Boston, I would just kind of skate around my school. I like the jazz of not knowing what's going to be there, but limitations do force creativity. And if you're in a skate park, you might be like, okay, what's something I could do on this ramp? A way I've never thought about it. So sometimes, like, putting yourself in a limited space can with just specific things, because the street's pretty big and there's a lot of spontaneity and stuff, but sometimes that's why I love skating in my living room. It's like the limitation just makes me think about it so much differently. I mean, I guess you could say, yeah, it's flat ground, it's freestyle, but it's also, I have to be quiet because people live below me.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure they're definitely fans of your freestyle living room skating.
Well, everything I do has to be as silent as a pin dropping. I mean, it's like because I have to also be able to do it on a stage so that I don't damage the stage.
Wow. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, it's just like, I love the limitations. I feel like, because people might think I'm crazy about skating in my living room, but I just put on my TV the ocean because I had this dream of skateboarding out by the beach, and I talked to so many different skaters. I don't know if you know Colin Fisk at all, but I talked to him about trying to find a place to skate, and he's like, you could go to Lynn Beach. Like, I was just wanting to find a place where I could skateboard along the ocean and no one would be there. And I couldn't find it in Boston, so I just cast it on my TV.
I love that. Yeah, I was going to ask, so in terms of skateboarding, you would consider yourself a freestyle skater?
Yeah, that's definitely the style.
In terms of like Rodney Mullen, like that type of kind of interesting shit where it's like unconventional, invented, and cool tricks like that.
Yeah, it's basically like all I do now is just like flat ground.
Awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah, holy shit. I gotta say, this has been like we usually have no idea what to expect when we interview people, but once again, my expectations are just completely like wildly exceeded, or is that the right way? Like, this has just been like crazy because like I think magic is like super cool, but you have made it sound like fucking sick. Like even like way cooler than initially, like, because I did not like magic. I thought it was, it's like a cool thing, but that is a really fucking interesting way of thinking about it.
Thanks so much. I mean, I love it. So I think when you love what you do and you're passionate about it, you maybe that people sense that energy or that love, but thanks for the compliment. I mean, I definitely, one of my goals is to make people's perceptions of magic, and I would guess like puppeteers have the same problem, like if you say you're a puppeteer, people would probably be like, oh, you must do stuff for kids, but there's probably puppeteers that do adult stories or grown-up stories, and one of my goals as an artist is to, in the mainstream, get people to see magic as an art and something that, because music has had so many people, like Dylan comes to mind, but just different artists that pushed it so that it could be artistic. And that hasn't really happened in a lot of other art forms. I mean, even skateboarding's in the Olympics, but, Rodney Mullen and people talk about the philosophy and it being an art, not just sport. So I think if people hear this and if you guys liked it and you saw magic as something less trivial or more mystical and artistic, that makes me happy. So thanks.
Yeah. You definitely achieved that. Now, one thing I don't want to forget about too is you recently put out a book or a zine as well.
Oh yeah. That's why we were just initially talking.
Right, yeah, we'd love to hear about the project.
It's weird, too, because it's so new, Like, when people ask me about magic, I've been doing it so long that, you feel really confident about talking about it. But it's so fun to talk about new projects because I haven't put words to it yet. And it's, it basically was all of these, it's called Seance, so it's a zine, and it's all of these true stories of my past, and it tells you to light a candle and make popcorn. And, if you look at words, I think Alan Moore talks about how a grimoire, an ancient book of magic spells, well, grammar is just a fancy word for that. So when we arrange spells in the right order. It's grammar, and writing is spelling. So casting a spell is just writing. And I was like, that's really interesting. So if I write these words and tell these stories, people can, through the realm of magic and words, enter the story realm, and I can conjure up all of these monsters of my past. And since it's not bullshit and none of the stories are made up, then when people come back to reality after reading, they might see them. For instance, when I was a kid, my dad brought me out, and he was like, look near this tree, and he made a shoe print in the snow. And he put his finger down, and there was these coffee grain-like particles, and they started to jump everywhere. And he's like, those are snow fleas. And it's just this little poetic moment. But after that, I was like afraid to eat snow. And now people can go out in the woods and be like, can find out that there's fleas that live in the snow. So it's like this Goosebumps R.L. Stine kind of approach of, I loved like spooky stories to tell in the dark. When I was a kid, I read that book, and I wanted to make like my version of that book, but that all of these little stories would be real things. Like another one was when we went into this bait and tackle shop, and this elderly man was like, come over here, and he lifted the lid off this cover, and there was these glowing green worms, and they're called nitro crawlers. You can look them up, and they like inject these things into these worms that make them like neon green. Wow. And like every page is just a little short story like that, with a painting that I did of all of the images, and like they're all true stories though. So it's like the little spirits and monsters are things that you can then go out and actually see in the real world, like in a bait and tackle store or in the snow. And that was like the seance aspect of it, is that it would kind of haunt your real world with these things afterwards if you wanted to go see them.
Huh. That's really interesting. I think that's really cool too, because it ties into sort of what you were saying about the little house friends, like really kind of seeing the beauty or the horror in very small occurrences in your real life.
Yeah, and like the kind of theme of it is like that of a jack-o'-lantern. Like everything is meant to be spooky and not on the like dark horror side, but more on like that flea circus kind of vibe, where it's like the enchanting qualities of Halloween, and it's meant to bring more light in during this time where it's darker during the day. So it's kind of like every illustration is really about bringing more light in.
Oh, I love that.
That is absolutely beautiful.
So if somebody was looking to get a copy of Seance, where would they be able to do that?
So I think I have like 20 copies. I only had 50 copies made up, and 30 are gone. And then like after those were gone, I don't know if you guys sell art or music, but I tend to find that like after there's that wave, you just have like a stack of like 10 or 20 that sit in the dust.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
So I have those, and if people you can find me on Instagram. It's just at Joe Ledoux Magic, and you can message me there, and I can mail one to you. They're only $10. And also my website, joeledoux.com, has all my contact, and people can find me through there too and reach out, and they just ship right in an envelope, so they're really easy to send out.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and so for all the listeners, that link is right there. Click on that shit right now.
We'll put it there.
All right. Well, Joe, this has been fucking awesome. Thank you so much for talking with us and for giving us this knowledge and information. It's been wonderful to connect with you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Brian and Theo, right? I'll look at your guys' pages too, because I want to learn more about your art and what you do, and maybe we can all like meet up for coffee or something, and I could do some magic around the table and learn about your art too. And it's cool that you guys do this and kind of expose people to like the underground art scene of Boston, or maybe just like because I feel like artists are not the best at promotion or being seen, and there's so much filtering through art galleries and stuff. So it's cool that you kind of let people's voices and art be heard here. So thanks.
Well, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And we'd love to meet up and see some magic for sure.
Yeah, that would be so fun.
Yeah, hell yeah. Well, All right, we'll wrap this up for now, and we'll connect again in the future. And for all the people listening, go buy that zine and check out this wonderful art and knowledge. So, yeah, thank you so much, man. It's been wonderful talking to you.
All right, thanks a lot. Bye.
All right, have a good one. Bye-bye. Okay, yeah, Boston Art Podcast. We really got to think of a better way to outro these besides just being like, all right, bye. Bye, peace, dude. All right, Boston Art Podcast. We'll see you again next Friday. Thank you, guys. Bye.